Journey, a platform where we bring together scientists to inspire each other through the power of storytelling. And on today's session, we are joined by a very special guest because he's my mentor. And we are going to learn from him from our just continuing on our Leadership in Science series. We'll get to hear a bit of his own science journey, but more also about leading in science, especially in the African context. So welcome, Thumbi. Nice to see you.
Many thanks, Anita. It's a pleasure for me to be here, and it's very good to see you again.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll get right into it with just an icebreaker to start the conversation. And that is, I would ask you to tell us something that many people may not know about you outside of your professional work. Maybe what you enjoy doing when you're not leading modeling work in Africa.
Okay, let's see. Maybe people might not know that I adore racket games. I love squash, I love table tennis, I like badminton,
Mm-hmm.
lawn tennis, and I play all of them.
Oh, okay. Are you good?
Yesterday I played 15 games with a professor friend of mine, and I won. This is Kush. I
Mm-hmm.
think I won 12 of the 15, and he's pretty good.
Okay, okay. And you're not blowing your own trumpet.
No, maybe he was letting me do this because he knew I'd answer a question like this.
He was setting you up for success. Oh, that's awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
So what's one moment from maybe your upbringing or your childhood that first sparked your curiosity into the career that you're in right now?
Well, I think for curiosity, as far as I remember, I possibly would say my own father was
Mm-hmm.
quite instrumental. Of all the subjects we learned in primary school, he only cared for one, which was mathematics. So if I came back with my report form, and that's true also for my other two brothers, and we had passed in mathematics, he was happy. He didn't care for anything else on that paper. He just thought that if you knew mathematics, then you'd be set for life.
And that's not biased at all.
I don't know. I think it's a pretty good prediction of I mean life has a lot of maths.
Yeah,
For
yeah,
the kind
that's
of work I do now, it's mathematics applied on biology and the likes, and I think he possibly was right.
Yeah, that's true. Math is applicable in many fields. So he had something going for sure. Yeah. So just to remind our audience that we are in conversation with Professor Thumbi Mwangi, and he is a professor at Washington State University, but also the co-founder and co-director at the Center for Epidemiological Modelling and Analysis. And if you have any questions for him as we go on with the conversation, please put them in the chat and tell us where you're joining us from. Yes. So, Thumbi, walk us a bit through your academic path because you started from veterinary medicine and then you went into animal genetics and then you went into infectious disease epidemiology, which is most of what you're doing now. And walk us through a bit of the turning points of each stage and what inspired those transitions.
Okay, so I trained initially as a veterinarian. I got into vet school. It's not a very inspiring reason for getting to vet school. It's not that I loved animals, that all my life wanted to be a vet.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, what happened is I had another brother who had just joined the Invite Nairobi before me, and he was studying medicine to be a human doctor. And his roommate, who they were with together in high school, was taking veterinary medicine. And when I got my results and I was thinking about what should I do for for my degree at the university,
Mm-hmm.
he sort of said his roommate was so much enjoying veterinary school that he actually thought veterinary school was a good place to be. And I believed him, and I sort of joined the vet school.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's at the vet school where I think my real curiosity for science happened. So in my first year, we used to have this kind of very long lectures, 3 hours of lectures. The lecturers would draw on the board. It's long before the new tools that we have now for teaching. And then came in a gentleman who had just finished his PhD from Switzerland at the University of Bern.
Mhm.
And he had a different teaching style, which was he gave us handouts. And instead of 3 hours of lectures, he would speak for 30 minutes and allow us to go and digest the information he had offered on those handouts. And his name is Professor Kiyama, who became my mentor. And at some point, he gave us the continuous assessment test. And for some reason, I passed in that test. So he wrote the paper, please come and see me. And so I went to see him. And then he said, um, well, I just wanted to know who you are, but also to sort of tell you about the course you have come into is such an exciting course. And after you finish, there is also another life that you could possibly think of as becoming a researcher, because after 10 years of, say, surgery of the bone of dogs or horses, you possibly could get bored. But if you pick the line of research, you can keep changing the topic of interests over time, and you keep your mind young, and I think you really enjoy research. So he planted that seed in me very first year of my university life, and again I believed him, and so after I finished, I was given a scholarship back to Invito Nairobi to study genetics and animal breeding. And the reason I actually went to that course is because along the way I had learned about DNA, and I thought, oh, this is really interesting. I want to be a lab scientist. I want to go and pipette and find these little, molecules. And so in the course of the veterinary school, genetics at least was one place where I could learn about DNA and become a molecular biologist, which I did. And I was studying human animal trypanosomiasis and the linkages of that, generating sort of creating diagnostic tools, molecular diagnostic tools for that. And after about a year and a half in the lab, I was pretty sure I wanted to be out of the lab. So I actually chose a PhD route to work on epidemiology. And so that's how I moved from vet into genetics. And then I took a PhD in epidemiology from the University of Edinburgh, where I met another like inspirational figure in my life, Professor Mark Woolhouse, who was my PhD supervisor. Him, together with Professor Kiam and a gentleman I had met during my master's by the name Francis Makodimba, I owe them for training me to be a scientist and for giving me like these huge opportunities to think and believe in science.
Yeah.
As a Yeah.
Wow. So I think some of the things I picked up, especially the importance of mentorship, because each stage of your academic journey, you've mentioned like a very key mentor who shaped your journey through that. And at least I'm glad to report that you're paying it back. And I'm one of the products of that. But what I found funny was you got a come see me on your test when you passed, because most times we get come see me when we failed, not when we passed.
Yeah, I think Prof. Kema was genius in that. Then he inspired me, to think about science. Actually, I had not known a scientist before. I had not. Yeah, so I was learning for the first time that there's actual, like, you could think of a PhD, a master's. Those things I had them when I came to the university, not before.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay. And then, so you went for your PhD at the University of Edinburgh, and after that, like you didn't mention it, but at some point you also moved to the US, and maybe you could speak about that before I ask my next question.
Yeah, so when I was taking my PhD, and I used to work on livestock, I was actually interested in children, basically baby cattle, calves in the first year of life. Um, and the gentleman I was working with at the time, Professor Mark Woolhouse. there's something he taught me very early on. Because when I started, I had spent some time also at the International Livestock Research Institute, IRRI, during my master's.
Mhm.
And they used to have a nice slogan about better lives through livestock. So I sort of thought science more like it's almost like an NGO and you have to impact society. So I was starting my PhD with this thinking that I could actually impact society through the kind of work I was doing. What I found really useful from Mark was he said to me very early on in my PhD that for these next 3, 4 years that you're working with me, I want you to think of the cattle as a not very important animal. Think of the hedgehog. Think of whatever you're studying like a hedgehog. It has no livelihood importance, but can you really do good science with it? So he said, if you want to impact policy, then you need to be credible. And credibility is through good science. So it invests in getting, becoming a good scientist through the studies that you're doing for your PhD, even if whatever you're studying was not necessarily a very important thing. I mean, hedgehogs are important, don't get me wrong. But if you do that, then you could certainly, end up having people thinking of you as a credible individual, and they would approach you for policy. And then, so when I finished, then we had the conversation again, and he says, after 4 years of working with me, I think I've taught you almost everything I could teach you. If you stick here, I have a postdoctoral fellowship for you, but if you stick here, you might not learn much more. So there are other groups that also work on different things. I'm in full support of you pursuing opportunities outside of my lab. And that's how I got this postdoctoral fellowship at Washington State University to set up a program that now was connecting human and animal health. Illnesses in animals, how do they translate into illnesses in humans, and whether there's a connection through nutrition and socioeconomic pathways of households. And that's how I landed myself into a position in Washington State University as a postdoctoral fellow immediately after my PhD.
Mm, awesome. Wow. So then, so you with all this, with the affiliations that you have with all these global institutions like Washington State University, the University of Edinburgh, how have you been able to navigate these global spaces while staying rooted in Africa and Kenya? What trade-offs or advantages or disadvantages have come with that?
Yeah, so, well, I think it's been very fortunate to be able to hold good positions, with the US university, and at some point also with again back to the University of Edinburgh,
Mhm.
working with the team that I worked with during my PhD, where I was being based, within Africa at the University of Nairobi. Um, I think that the very unique thing that happened is when I was joining Washington State University, they had just started a new school called the Paul Allen School for Global Animal Health then. Now it's called the Paul Allen School for Global Health. And the school was started from philanthropic money from Paul Allen, and also I think Gates and Bill Gates and others that contributed. And one of the financiers of that program, the Paul Allen, I think, as I'm told, he had visited Tanzania a long time ago and really loved the elephants there. And so when he gave the philanthropy money, so he said, if you develop this really nice idea about global animal health work,
Mhm.
please also work in East Africa. Because I liked East Africa. So that's how like the Washington State University was very clear at the very start that they also wanted to have a global health program within East Africa. But the really unique thing was to say, well, we can actually have faculty of Washington State University who live where the work is happening. So, and because among institutions, there are some institutions that don't die, like universities don't die, right? Like it's very rare.
Mm.
That's why universities are 500, 600 years old. The Washington State University really wanted us to develop a relationship with a local institution within the country that was like it, like University of Nairobi. So my position was to be at Washington State University as faculty, but primarily based within a local university, and that University of Nairobi. So
Mhm.
in essence, it's not like serving two different, it's the same purpose.
Mhm.
So I think of it like what's the advantage of having that kind of international exposure, but working also quite locally.
Yeah.
For me, I see that I'm able to access like the grants and access the students and access, the capacities that are in these, very much older universities and apply them within Kenya or within East Africa, within Africa, where primarily my work is based. I think the big advantage is that then I'm able to know what are the real issues that are facing, the society here that can be addressed with science and by science, and use them, to use the science that we have to influence them in a positive way for the benefit of the people.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Awesome. Building on that, what would you say is because you have these collaborations with institutions in America, in Europe, in other non-Sub-Saharan African countries, but you also have collaborations within Sub-Saharan Africa and Asia. So, what would you say are the different dynamics in those collaborations and the different dynamics and how to approach them?
Um, I would actually say there's more similarities than there are differences,
Okay. Hmm.
because the global academic world is nearly the same. We have almost the same, metrics or what you'd call legal tender. We all get judged almost the same way. Is your science good enough, published in good journals? So are you producing publications? Are you able to attract money
Mm,
fund that research, because it's a sort of a vicious cycle. Papers give you credibility, credibility gives you opportunities to get grants, and more grants give you more papers. And that I think is true in Asia, in the US, in Europe. Um, and then the other really critical thing is about passing on knowledge, and training. So whether you're supporting knowledge sharing at undergraduate level or graduate level, even post doctoral level and above. And then the fourth one, which now I think is increasingly really important for almost any university where anywhere,
mm,
is the impact beyond the scientific world. How we influence or use the skills and knowledge that you have got to, better the society. So I feel like in that context, I don't see the difference being in WSU or being in Edinburgh or being in the Invited Nobel, like those are common denominators for all of them.
yeah.
The difference, I think, is in the amount of resources available. Um, so for many of our local institutions, if you don't have lots of people who have well-funded programs, then even the support for masters and PhDs is not great, because then students are having to sort of use their own money to do science, which is not very easy. But where there's abundance of resources, stipends are paid, the reagents are bought, computers are bought, like it's for Anita to just flourish in those environments. So that's what you're sort of trying to also create within the environment here, so as the ground is ripe for the talent on the continent to really grow, because all they need, I think, is resources and mentorship, which we can provide also on the continent.
Yeah, awesome. Okay. I think that's a very good segue for us to move into the leadership aspect. But before that, we have a question. Um, when you were speaking about your mentors and your relationship with your mentors, we got a question from Kelechi who asks, what are some helpful tips for mentees who want to cultivate a good relationship with their mentors or supervisors?
Um, well, tips. I think you just have to be human, like be genuinely curious and and I mean, I'm saying even friendly because humans are friendly to each other, and you'll discover a lot of people besides their very busy schedules. They have a goal within themselves to do better and support people that are coming after them. And I would tell you, it's like if you have 12 months of salary, some organizations give you a 13th month salary. Like mentorship is almost that. It's such a, I would say, a blessing to be able to see people flourish under your mentorship and help. So I think the tip is to ask and follow people, be interested in what they do, also like give your aspirations, ask questions, because that's really helpful. I mean, I would say if I pick the example, say of my relationship with Professor Kiama, almost every stage, even at the time of selecting my what kind of master's program I would do, I had those very friendly conversations to listen to him. I'll give an example. Up to when I'd finished college, I'd never traveled out of my own country, Kenya.
Mhm.
And I got a master's, and somebody said to me, "Oh, I've got a scholarship for you to go and do work in Cardiff University in the UK." And another time I was very excited, but the kind of subject I was going to study wasn't really connecting me to what I'd expressed as the journey I wanted to travel. And he said to me, "I know you do want to get onto a plane, but hold your horses. Like here is a better opportunity. It might be local, but it'll open up those opportunities that you're interested in." So actually turned down going to Cardiff for my master's and did it back home because I was following a subject that was much more interesting. And so I think that kind of relationship with people who have gone before you, in a friendly, human way, can actually be the biggest tip about mentorship.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Yeah. So you left the chance to go abroad instead of... But yeah, that is the thing about mentors as well. They give you perspective that you would ordinarily not have just because they have that much more experience. Yeah. Okay, so let's get into leadership in science. So you lead teams both in Washington State University and in the Center for Epidemiological Modeling and Analysis. And first, how would you say is your leadership style, or how do you approach leadership, especially when you're managing these cross-institutional collaborations?
That's not a fair question from Anita, who has been in the team. Maybe you can answer that question for me.
Way to turn the tables. Okay, I will answer how you lead your teams, but then you will answer how you approach the cross-institutional collaborations. Yeah. So I think how I would describe your leadership style is in one word is mentorship. And what I mean by that is that you provide an environment for people to do the work that needs to be done, but grow while at it. And I think that is a leadership style that is not very common um, in many institutions because most times it's always you're here for a reason. You're here to do a job and get the job done. But I think what I've seen and learned from your leadership style is that the work will get done, but it's better if it gets done and the person doing the work also grows while doing it. So I think that is how I would describe your leadership style. Am I accurate?
Well, I think you're right because the one advantage you have had like at SEMA is we have a lot of young people.
Yeah.
And I think learning by doing also grows people's confidence. And some of the projects that we work on here are critical projects, right? Like if you're having to generate evidence or insights that might influence a big policy or a big programmatic action, that's a huge thing.
Yeah.
But we don't leave that only to, the ones who are senior research fellows who have got PhDs and postdoctoral. We also allow the young early in their career to contribute to the work with
Mhm.
guidance and supervision. And then, some of the work is needed really quickly, but But I think the young people have even more energy to get things done overnight, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, and that's for me, I think is possibly the best way to deal with it. Provide guidance, but also like give people full responsibility to do even things that would seem to be reserved for a certain, level of experience, as long as there's guidance and you can support them to do a good job. I think that's a way to grow them.
Yeah.
Regarding the cross-institutional, again, it's almost the same thing. Like whatever my goals are with WSU, whatever the goals are with CEMA, whatever the goals are with, they all align because, as I said before, it's a global academic world with
Yeah.
almost the same metrics. So I don't find that very difficult, except for like the little things that happen differently between institutions, which you expect even at places of work.
Yeah, yeah, the bureaucracies are always there because of the processes.
The
Yeah,
processes are different and people are different, yes.
yeah. Okay. Speaking of, you mentioned that your work, like most of the work that you do, influences policy. And first, my first question is because when you walked up through your journey, it was very academic, research oriented, but the work you're doing now is more of policy advisory. So how was that move from pure academia research into policy and public health advisory?
I think I would define our work still academic and research
Mm-hmm.
because the really critical thing is the curiosity for questions. So, for instance, right now, the big question on our table is to re-estimate the maternal mortality for Kenya. And that's a government request. Um, so to be able to give a good answer, there must be really good methods, academic, proper research.
Yeah.
Uh, it's only that then at the end of it, there's a way to work the insights of that research into a programmatic action or a policy. So I think um, I wouldn't say that we have shifted our work to policy work. Actually, we have grown deeper with academic and research work,
Mm-hmm.
but gotten opportunities to work the evidence that we generate a little bit further than a paper, than a publication
Mm-hmm.
to influence how programs are financed or how interventions are implemented at a public health level.
Yeah.
And I still hold that quite dearly, that even though policy is seen to be this almost socio-political issue, that the only reason we get on the table, I am under no illusion of or confusion that it's because of the academic and research extra insights that you can bring more than just if that was not. So I don't see them as two separate shifts. What I see is just a big opportunity to do the best science and use the best research to influence or to be at least include some of that information on the table because it's not just science that determines how policies are drawn. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Okay. That is the best answer I've ever had to that question. That it's not really a shift, but it's just building on the academic work. But the academic rigor and the methodology are still there because that's what makes the policy be evidence-based and the evidence to be excellent. Yeah, great. So speaking of policy work, you are, I'm not sure if it still exists, but you led the COVID-19 modeling committee for Kenya. So maybe you could tell us a bit about your experience doing that and the lessons that you got from that role, and especially in the role of local modeling expertise in responding to crisis in Africa.
Yeah. Well, you talk about COVID times, eh? COVID is a long time ago now.
Apparently, who knew?
We need to come to an end. Um, yeah, so first of all, I think the idea about policy engagement in a crisis is what we see a lot.
Mm,
Yeah. Because like COVID allowed academic and research institutions to really come up,
mhm,
partly because people who make decisions did not have experience with COVID. It was new. There was a lot of uncertainty, and so all the information could not be held in their heads. So then the academic and researchers really came up and was very beneficial for countries.
Mhm.
Our experience actually starting working with COVID in Kenya was based on a very simple question. So a task force was formed immediately after the first case happened on the 13th March of 2020. And when the task force people met, virologists, clinicians, people in NGOs, they asked, okay, now we have the first case here in Kenya. How long will it take to get the first 1,000 cases? And how long will it take to get the first 10,000 cases? I think that the people in the room then realized actually it's a really nice question, but how do you answer that? And somebody in the room who had worked with before said, "Oh, I know of a team at the Invite Nairobi that does these predictions and modeling, and maybe we can ask them that question." And so that's how the question landed onto us to make the prediction of when we get the first 1,000 cases and the first 10,000 cases. Which we did, quite immediately with very simple models of the dynamics we'd expect given the conditions we had and what we had seen happening in Italy and in Europe and in China. And we gave that answer. It was pretty useful for making the very first decisions about the initial response to cases being found in the country. And immediately that role was seen as we should now actually have this kind of answers or questions given to this kind of groups to help us peep into the future, even if it's the next 1 week or the next 2 weeks, if we know how the infections are happening in the country. But we are very careful not to be a single source of truth. Because we wanted in normal times, you do a paper, it goes through peer review, and by the time it's published, if you had made any mistakes, maybe your reviewers have seen that. So what we did was establish a peer review mechanism such that we had three groups actually that were modeling from different institutions. And my job was to bring those groups twice a week and then see the results of the different models and what we have all produced, and then have a consensus message, or at least some message that would go to the ministry and to government that helped, determine the actions from an academic place, also with peer review, right?
Yeah.
So as we were giving not mental models, but a lot of good science that we were generating from our desk, and that was my role at the time to support academic research work to be on the table when they're making decisions.
Great. And what would you say then that experience taught you about, especially like the presence of modeling expertise in Africa? Because I don't think that was as common before the COVID-19 pandemic.
I think it taught me about maybe three things, many more things, but maybe let me pick three. The first was that when people are making decisions, like trust is such an important thing. They want to know who are you and why should we listen to you? What is it that you bring to the table that actually makes our decision better compared to if you're not there? And that's I think is partly the reason why local modeling teams were really important, because the rapport, they know about the kind of work you've been doing in different sectors, and they know your credentials, and they also know you have like the interest of the country at heart. There's no conflict of interest in that context. So that made it much easier for information to flow and be trusted. The second thing I learned was the person you call the policymaker is a very elusive person. It's not a single person. Like during a pandemic, that policymaker changes. At the beginning of the outbreak, it's the guy who is responsible for disease outbreaks, the one who puts the line list. When the cases are a lot more, then his director, the director general becomes the person who you'll be dealing with, because now it's dealing with like almost a sectoral issue. Then it becomes a national disaster, like what COVID had become. Then the Ministry of Health is one part, but then you have the minister and the National Security Council. So the policy maker just keeps changing,
Mm,
dependent on how many people are getting affected or how big the problem is. And then once like you go through these, height of cases and everybody now is coming down, then you come back almost to your program person. So it's understanding that the policymaker is not a single person. It depends on the kind of situation you're dealing with. The third thing I learned was we like perfection, but progress over perfection. Like it's more important to provide the best evidence you can when the decision is about to be made than to wait for the 3 weeks down the line to say here is the best evidence. The decision was made and people moved on.
mm.
So and that's a really difficult thing to do, but it's so important if you have to have science contribute to the work that you do. For crisis times, time is of essence. For other things, you have the time. You're making a strategic plan in 6 months. We have time, but during the during crisis, you have got to provide the best evidence that you have got at the time the decision has been made.
Yeah. And I can imagine that was a bitter pill to swallow for scientists who are very meticulous
Yeah.
and keen with detail. But in crisis times, as you said, time is of the essence and decisions need to be made, schools need to be opened or closed. And that will not wait for you to have all the data that you need to have a single estimate. Yeah.
And
Okay.
with you or without you, the decision will still be made.
Oh, okay. That's a harsh truth, but yeah. Yeah. So speaking of models and modeling, um, what does it take to build robust modeling tools that are tailored especially for African data or our own realities and contexts?
Yeah. So I think the really critical thing is having data sets that represent the place that you're trying to model for.
Mm,
Um, and we saw this at the beginning of COVID. Our very initial models were based on, the data that had come from Europe. And we had our estimates were showing like really catastrophic events were going to happen on the continent. But you are careful to present that like this is the worst case scenario. And as soon as we have our own data to show how the disease is spreading in the population, we recalibrate our models to be representative of the population you are trying to address. So I think data sets and having the right data that describe the place that you want to work in is really critical. The second thing, obviously, is modeling is a tough skill, but it's not an impossible skill. And with the right training and mentorship, it happens. It's
yeah.
it's. I think the key thing is that it cannot be a hit and run, right? Like it's not a 1 week training on maths modeling at CEMA that converts you into a modeler. There ought to be like, a longer, you have to do your own projects, but you keep growing the skill. So I think understanding that to develop those skills, even on our continent, it's not going to be a short, it's a longer investment is really critical. And if you're fair and you look at, say, some of the biggest modeling groups of the world, I
Mm,
mean, I'll pick an example, a place like Imperial College, which is pretty good and has lots of modelers,
yeah.
but they were doing this from the 90s before Anita was born, right? So
Yeah.
so it's taken quite some time. It's just that I think the tools we have right now can help us really move faster and
Mm,
create these kind of centers of excellence also within our continent. And the last point, Anita, I want to mention is it's people. Yeah,
mm,
yeah. We say here that people make SEMA. It's people that make this kind of groups, that eventually influence how the world, or at least support how the society lives. And so I think an investment in people is really, really important.
yeah. That's very true. Okay. So before we transition into like the last quarter of our conversation. I'll take a few questions. Ruth asks, thank you for sharing your experience. Could you please share your most rewarding moment in this journey?
Right. I think I have very many repeated
Mm,
rewarding moments. I think I mentioned earlier about the 13th month salary, which is like the graduation of a PhD student or a master student, or the accolades of Anita and others. I think those are the most meaningful achievements or moments of happiness for me. There are many other things that have happened. You get appointed to committees, you get big grants, a paper gets into a big journal. Those are part of the journey. But I think the lasting one is about humans. It's about yeah, seeing your contribution, playing a role meaningfully into students or people that you work with. And now I think also with the kind of work we do on policy, like knowing that our science really contributed to the efficiencies of public health
mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
that, yeah.
Okay. Speaking of efficiencies, David asks, as a technocrat leader, how did you navigate the complex and often bureaucratic and political environment during the COVID-19 pandemic?
Um, how did I navigate? And
Yeah.
I, I think I think humans are humans, and recognizing that having a good, genuine conversation and having good relationship with people is really important. Um, and I don't know. I think it's also true for science. Like if you got to make it in science, you got to be also a good person in the context of you have good relationship with your collaborators, and it's I think the same way in which you succeed in your PhD and succeed in your scientific work, you need to carry those same traits even when you go into policy, because even though there are bureaucracies and interests, at the end of the day people value credibility, people value honesty, people value respect, and to also be humble enough to know that it's not the science insight only that matters on the table.
Mm,
You present it, but you're not fully responsible for the decision. I think if you sort of apply that combination of realities,
mhm.
it should be fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is a good answer because I think sometimes when you're siloed with the technical aspects, and for you it makes sense that they should just go with this decision because that's what makes sense according to the science. But you've not considered that the person making the decision has other things he has to think about away from this one piece of information you give them. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. So then, on that reflective mode, what is one mistake or challenge from your journey that taught you an important lesson?
You're asking for my failures.
In a very diplomatic way.
Right. Good. I think there are many, but the most recent one that I experienced maybe two months ago.
Mhm,
Uh, so we did this huge proposal. We were sending to a big, funder, couple of millions of dollars. And I brought together, leading a consortium, many people. We were all learning about this new subject and many institutions. And we kept pushing to get the best, proposal in. And so we just never stopped pushing until the deadline was so close, right? And then submitted it, and then it needed approval from the institution, and the person on the other end said, "You have given me too late. I'm not submitting it." And so I've got like 20 different scientists that have really worked for 2, 3 months. And then the reason the proposal is not going forward is because somebody made a decision at the very tail end, and that person does not know all the other people, and you have to be the face to also give, feedback that it never got submitted. And then I'm responsible because I should have actually looked at the times and made sure that we had provided these things like a day or 2 days before. Yeah, so that's a lesson. I think it's nice to prepare and do it ahead of time, but even to us, it does happen. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's a very practical lesson. But I would say for someone like me who's still starting out, a missed deadline does not cost as much as someone like you. I think the stakes are higher. The lesson is the same, but the stakes are higher the higher you go, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah. And it feels as bad, actually. It's not so
Yeah.
enjoyable. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. Okay. Hard lesson learned. Okay, so then if you are starting out, say at the time that you were making the decision to go into vet medicine because your brother's roommate was in vet medicine, at that point, what and looking forward, is there something that you would do differently along your journey?
I would say no, partly because I think so far I recognize that the opportunities I've had and the successes I've had are not fully like neatly planned by Thumbi,
Mm,
right? That I recognize quite well because I never knew that we would start a SEMA, for instance, and then the opportunities came, even though the ideas were sort of flowing, like how to get there. There's also opportunities that just show up. I mean, like they say, opportunities come to those who are prepared. Maybe that's what I would say. I wouldn't say that I would go back and restart and take a different course because even where I've gotten, I think I see a lot of fate and opportunities that came to me
yeah,
that I wouldn't say I'm fully responsible for those.
yeah.
It's to recognize it's not just me who drives the world, my world. That there must be some other driver as well, in addition to my preparation.
Yeah, yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. And so most of our audience is usually early or mid-career scientists or even students. So what advice would you give to a young scientist who wants their work to be rigorous and relevant and contribute to decision making that impacts lives like yours?
Yeah, maybe the advice I got, think of your work like it's a work of a hedgehog. It has no other importance except that it is really good science, done the best way possible. And when you have got, credibility from that context, and then that becomes the thing that gets you invited onto the table.
Mm-hmm.
So consistently producing really good science, following a good line of area that you're interested in,
Yeah.
eventually, your name and credibility will build, and then opportunities will come. And
Mm.
when they come, then I think you have to not be shy. Like
Mm.
you have to be like, I think I heard you one day say you should be shameless. Like go for them, right?
Yeah.
Because if it's meaningful things, like go for them.
Yeah.
But
Sure.
behind you, it should be the best version of yourself that you put in the time to do the best science possible and presented the science the best way possible. And then when opportunities to translate that into policy or into part of the evidence that will be considered come,
Mm.
yeah, stand by your work.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay. So, we have a question from Edward. What is a moment? This is interesting. What is a moment where you questioned whether you were qualified enough?
Um, the moment when I was asked to come and talk on my son's journey.
Oh, really?
I mean, the reason I'm saying that is that like it's almost every single moment that
Mhm.
if, I don't know, maybe other people have much more confidence that they are on the top of the world, but I think I questioned myself as well, like, okay, am I an expert in this? Should I be the one speaking?
Mhm.
And it's taken me time to, accept
Mhm.
that, when put together in this room, I could actually be the one who knows a lot
Yeah.
about that one thing, and then translate that into confidence to want to be part of it.
Mhm.
But to answer the question is yes, there are very many moments,
Mhm.
even moments when you see a grant, put out there for people to compete. It's a little bit on the edge of things that you don't do, but you can see how you can progress your work to it. That moment is a bit of should I not? But
Mhm.
along the way, there is enough evidence that you can actually push the boundaries,
Yeah.
and the evidence sort of create your confidence to keep moving on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's helpful to know that it's normal to feel that way because I think sometimes we think that it's only like when you're starting out that you feel that way. But it's encouraging to hear that even at your level, you have those moments sometimes. Yeah. So we have another question. What kind of data sources does SEMA use most for building models, and how do you deal with gaps in health data?
Mhm.
Mm.
So that's a good question. So it depends. If I take the example of the work we do with neglected tropical diseases, they are called neglected for a reason.
Mhm.
Like they don't have the same kind of really nice surveillance data that you might get, say, for malaria or for HIV. Those data sets will possibly be created through surveys that happen so often, so there's not like continuous information of every month.
Yeah.
So those are the kind of like data sets that we use for some of our models. I think the critical thing is to be able to recognize the weaknesses of those data sets, and not oversell. What you have to be very clear with the assumptions you are making for that. But I think to the last part of your question, like for modeling is not just about like predicting what's going to happen in a month or two. It's also to help define what might be a better surveillance system to give you the appropriate data that could help you with the program. So we sort of do that. We do that. We use the data that we have got, but also try and provide feedback that if you're interested in leishmaniasis and you want to do a good model about its elimination in East Africa, here is the kind of data set that we require, so as we can give you a very good view of whether or not you can make it. So I think
Yeah.
that's, yeah, you have to sort of think of, we are using the data to do the model, but also like to feed the system so as you get improved data sets over time.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Great. Okay. So I think I don't see any other questions from our audience. So as we close, what keeps you inspired or hopeful about the future of health, global health or science or public health in Africa?
Um, so I think two things. The first one is a recognition there is no magic bullet. Um, if you elect a new government into your country, it's unlikely to be magical, right? But what we sort of tend to see is more cumulative progress.
Mhm.
And I think as a world in general, there's cumulative progress if you look at the under five mortality, it's actually going down. Some places it might be stagnating, but there's cumulative progress in that. If you think about even something like HIV, we have really come down to small numbers. We are making progress for malaria. So I think that keeps me inspired that my contribution, even though it's not the magic bullet, it does contribute to this cumulative progress of the human race.
Mm.
The second, which I am recognizing more and more, is faith in the very young people that are coming up into our spaces now.
Mhm.
And I say that because we are very fortunate, like at SEMA, to have programs that bringing people when they're still doing their first degree to internships when they come in and do their first, job with us, to people taking their masters, and the engine and the amount of ability and enthusiasm in those groups leaves me very inspired that the future is bright with our young talent.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of, how can someone, like a young person in the audience, join SEMA
Or an institution like SEMA, right?
or an institution like SEMA?
Yeah, I mean, for like the programs we have got here, we advertise for internship programs. They're often competitive. We try the best we can to bring in the most, inspired person feeling like this is their thing, and if they can convince us, they get the opportunity. I think you should do the same for any institution that you want to go to. Yeah, the same way like you never really get grants unless you apply for them. On few occasions, someone writes and says, "I want to give you," but often you have to sort of put in the work. I think anybody aspiring to go to any of these institutions, like ask, knock on the door.
Mhm.
Doors do get opened.
Ask and you shall receive.
There
Okay, thank you so much, Thumbi. I think that's it from the questions that we had. That's it from our session. This was very, very, very inspiring. And thank you for agreeing to come, even though you doubted why we invited you. Thank you so much for sharing your story, your science journey with us and with our audience, and for making the time on this Mazingira Day to join us. So that is the end of today's webinar. And for our audience, thank you for joining and for engaging with us with your questions and your thoughts. And we will see you in 2 weeks on our next webinar. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.